In Hampshire, in the spring of 1818, Miriam Dallow stopped a duke's wedding by lifting her hands from an organ. The silence came so abruptly that the entire chapel seemed to recoil from it. One moment, the private chapel at Hatherden Court had been filled with the solemn closing cadence, prepared for the marriage of Clement Somerby, Duke of Hatherden, to Lady Georgiana Stradwick. The next, there was nothing, no final chord, no reverberation beneath the carved stone arches, only the faint rustle of silk below, and the quiet shock of nearly 100 people wondering why the woman at the organ had refused to continue. Miriam did not look at them. Her eyes were fixed upon the manuscript before her. Yesterday, there had been 8 bars in the final cadence. She knew that because she had rehearsed them twice in the empty chapel, first slowly, then at the pace requested by the chaplain. 6 bars descended with grave dignity. The 7th turned unexpectedly upward through a delicate ornament. The 8th brought the melody home. Now the 7th bar was gone, not crossed through, not stained by wax or water, scraped away. The paper fibers stood pale and rough where the ink had been removed. Someone had not made a mistake. Someone had chosen one precise measure and erased it. Miriam felt her pulse beating high in her throat. She was 36 years old, unmarried, of gentle birth but modest means, and temporarily retained at Hatherden Court to catalogue the late Duchess's neglected music collection. She had also agreed to play for the wedding because the estate's elderly organist had become too ill to perform. She was not a guest. No one below had come to see her. She was the kind of woman society valued most when she remained useful, quiet, and easy to forget. At the altar, Lady Georgiana looked up first. Her ivory veil framed a face composed enough for a portrait, but her voice carried the sharp edge of command. "Continue." Miriam did not move. The chaplain glanced toward the Duke. A whisper stirred through the pews and died. Georgiana's expression tightened. "Miss Dallow," I said, "continue." Miriam looked once more at the damaged score. For a single dangerous second, habit nearly defeated conscience. She could play the remaining notes. She could omit the missing measure, finish the anthem, and allow the ceremony to proceed. No one would know what she had done. No one except her. It would preserve her position. It would protect her future commissions. It would spare a duke, a bride, and half the county from scandal. It would also make her part of whatever lie had been created on that page. Her late father's voice returned from memory, calm and exact. Never play what you know is false, merely because someone important has placed it before you. Miriam lifted her head. From the loft, she could see Georgiana at the altar, Lord Stradwick in the front pew, and Clement standing beside the woman he was meant to marry. The Duke did not look irritated. That would have been easier. He looked attentive. He was tall, dark-haired, and controlled, with the stillness of a man accustomed to examining a problem before acting. Society had spent years discussing the Somerby name. Clement's late father had left behind debts, scandals, and damage that his son had worked relentlessly to repair. This marriage was expected to complete that restoration. Miriam knew all of that. She also knew there had been 8 bars. Clement spoke. "What is wrong?" The question was addressed to her. Miriam rose from the bench. Her knees felt uncertain, but she refused to hold the organ for support. "There were 8 bars, Your Grace." The chapel became completely still. Georgiana gave a faint laugh of disbelief. Clement kept his eyes on Miriam. "Explain." "The final cadence had 8 bars when I rehearsed it yesterday. Today there are 7. Georgiana turned slightly. "Then play 7. We are keeping everyone waiting over a piece of music." Miriam lowered her gaze to the manuscript. "The 7th bar was present yesterday, my lady." "Then you remember incorrectly." Miriam looked up. "I don't." The words landed more softly than she intended, but they reached the altar. Georgiana's mouth hardened. This is hardly the moment for professional vanity. Several guests lowered their eyes. Others watched more closely. Miriam felt the old urge to apologize, simply because someone of higher rank had made discomfort sound like her fault. She remained silent instead. Clement looked up at her. Was the bar crossed out? "No, Your Grace." "Blotted?" "No." "Then what happened to it?" Miriam swallowed once. Someone scraped it from the page. Clement went completely still. Georgiana turned toward him. "Clement, surely we're not going to indulge this." He did not answer her. He left the altar. A collective breath passed through the chapel as the Duke crossed the aisle and walked toward the narrow stairs leading to the organ loft. Miriam stood where she was. Each footstep sounded too loud. When Clement appeared beside her, the small space seemed to contract around him. He did not touch the score at once. He bent over the manuscript and studied the pale abrasion between the 6th and 8th bars. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Miriam saw it. "You rehearsed this yesterday?" he asked. "Twice. And the 7th bar was present?" "Yes." "Can you remember what it contained?" "Every note." His eyes lifted to hers. Miriam expected suspicion. Instead, she found concentration so complete that it unsettled her more. "What exactly was there?" She described the measure, a descending phrase, a breath of silence, then the unusual ornament that turned upward before yielding into the final bar. Clement's face altered, only slightly. Recognition passed through it. Below them, Georgiana called, "Clement?" He ignored her. "Play the ornament," he said. Miriam hesitated. "Only the ornament, Your Grace." "Yes." She sat again. Her fingers returned to the keys. But she did not follow the mutilated score. She played from memory, 4 clear notes, a pause, then the delicate upward turn that belonged to the missing 7th bar. The sound rose into the chapel and faded beneath the stone arches. Clement did not move. Miriam looked up at him. "You know it," she said before caution could stop her. His gaze remained on the manuscript. 6 months ago, Lady Georgiana described that exact musical turn to me. Miriam said nothing. His voice lowered. "She told me my mother played it for her privately during the final year of her life." Something cold passed through Miriam. She looked down toward the altar. Georgiana stood motionless beneath her veil. "Your Grace," Miriam said carefully, "I had never met Lady Georgiana 6 months ago." "I know." Clement straightened. For the first time since entering the loft, he looked not merely attentive, but wounded by doubt. He descended the stairs. No one spoke as he crossed the chapel. Georgiana watched him approach. "Clement, this has gone far enough." He stopped several feet before the altar. "No." Lord Stradwick rose from the front pew. "Hatherden, surely you don't intend to disrupt a marriage alliance because a hired musician claims a measure is missing." Clement looked at him. "Miss Dallow did not claim a measure was missing. I saw where it had been removed." "Then investigate tomorrow." Clement's expression did not change. "The wedding is today." Georgiana's composure cracked for the first time. "You're humiliating me." Clement looked at her, and for one moment Miriam saw the cost of what he was about to do. This was not only a marriage, it was family reputation, social expectation, years of repair, and a future already arranged in the minds of everyone present. Still, his voice carried clearly to every corner of the chapel. "I will not speak vows while someone is erasing evidence under my roof." The silence that followed was different from the one Miriam had created. This one had chosen a direction. Clement turned toward the chaplain. "There will be no marriage today." A fan slipped from someone's hand. Lord Stradwick stepped forward, but Clement had already looked back toward the loft, toward Miriam. She stood alone above the assembly, one hand resting near the damaged score. She had come to Hatherden to catalogue forgotten music. She had expected to leave with a modest payment and no place in anyone's memory. Instead, a duke had stopped his wedding because she had refused to play 7 bars where 8 had once existed. Clement turned to the household steward. "No one touches that manuscript." Georgiana's face went pale. Miriam lowered her eyes to the scraped page. Only then did the deeper fear settle over her. Someone had not destroyed the anthem. Someone had removed one exact measure. The very measure Georgiana had once claimed the late Duchess had played for her in private, and whoever had done it had believed Miriam would lower her hands to the keys and continue. The chapel emptied slowly, not because anyone wished to leave, but because no one wanted to be the first to admit that the wedding had truly ended. Guests rose from the pews with stiff care, gathering gloves, fans, and silken skirts as though ordinary movements might restore ordinary order. Miriam remained in the organ loft beside the damaged manuscript until Mr. Bellamy, the household steward, reached her. His expression was grave, though not unkind. "His Grace asks that you leave the score exactly where it is, Miss Dallow." Miriam withdrew her hand from the edge of the music stand. "I haven't touched it since he gave the order." "I know." Below them, Clement stood near the altar, while the chaplain spoke quietly to him. Georgiana had left the chapel without looking back, escorted by an older female relation. Lord Stradwick had not followed. He remained near the front pew, speaking to Clement in a low voice, sharpened by anger. Miriam could not hear every word, but she caught enough. Reputation, alliance, absurdity, sandal. Mr. Bellamy looked toward them. "His Grace wishes to speak with you in the music room." Miriam's stomach tightened. "Now, as soon as the chapel is cleared." She glanced once more at the scraped place between the 6th and 8th bars. Yesterday, the 7th measure had been there. She could still hear it in memory with painful clarity. Mr. Bellamy waited without pressing her. Miriam descended the narrow stairs. By the time she reached the chapel floor, most of the guests had been directed toward the great drawing room, where refreshments were being served because aristocratic disaster, apparently, still required tea. Lord Stradwick turned when Miriam approached. His gaze settled on her with open disdain. "There she is." Clement looked at him. "Miss Dallow has a name, and my daughter had a wedding. Not any more." The words were quiet. They landed harder than anger would have. Lord Stradwick's face darkened. "You cannot seriously mean to destroy an alliance of this importance because a hired musician remembers one missing measure." Miriam felt the insult, but she had endured gentler versions of it all her life. What made this one dangerous was not the cruelty. It was how plausible it might sound to people who thought wealth and truth were related. Clement did not look at her. His attention remained on Lord Stradwick. "A measure was removed from a manuscript under my roof. I saw the damage myself." "Then investigate tomorrow." The wedding was today. Georgiana has done nothing to deserve this humiliation. Clement's expression did not change. "Then the truth will clear her." Lord Stradwick gave a short, bitter laugh. "Truth? You would place my daughter's honor beside the recollection of a woman who copies music for wages." Clement's gaze cooled. "I would place one fact beside another and examine both. The Earl's jaw tightened. Your father nearly ruined this house because he cared too little what society thought. You may finish the work by caring too much for nonsense. Something passed behind Clement's eyes and vanished. Miriam saw it because she had begun, over 6 weeks at Hatherden, to notice the difference between his stillness when he was calm and his stillness when he had been struck. Lord Stradwick turned away. When you come to your senses, you know where to find us. He left the chapel without waiting for an answer. Miriam lowered her gaze. Your Grace, I am sorry. Clement looked at her. For what? For the scandal. Did you erase the bar? No. Then do not apologize for discovering it. He turned toward the music room. Come. The doors of the music room remained open. The chaplain stayed near the window as Mr. Bellamy stood within sight from the corridor. Miriam noticed the arrangement immediately. So did Clement, perhaps because he did not explain it. He motioned toward a chair beside the long table. Please sit, Miss Dallow. She did. He remained standing for a moment, then took the chair opposite her. Tell me about the 8 bars. Miriam folded her hands. The closing cadence was adapted from a voluntary my father wrote many years ago. Clement's eyes sharpened. Your father composed it. The original piece, yes, he taught, copied music, and composed when someone asked him to. The late Duchess heard him perform part of the voluntary during a visit to Hampshire. Years later, she requested a version suited to the private chapel, and you helped revise it. Only the ending. Miriam paused. Your mother disliked the first 3 versions. Something almost human moved across Clement's face. That sounds like her. Miriam glanced at him. She knew what she wanted. Yes, the single word carried more affection than anything else he had said since the wedding stopped. Miriam continued. The final version had 8 bars. The 7th contained the unusual turn you heard me play this morning. It was never published. Was it ever performed outside Hatherden? Not to my knowledge. And Georgiana described it to me 6 months ago. Yes. Clement looked toward the shelves. She said my mother played it for her privately. Miriam waited. He seemed reluctant to continue, but when he did, his voice lost some of its distance. My mother did care for Georgiana. Miriam looked at him fully. Did she? Yes. Georgiana visited often during the final year of my mother's life. She was received in the private sitting room. My mother lent her books, asked after her when she was absent, once sent a carriage for her when the weather turned poor. Miriam took in the words carefully. Then some part of what Lady Georgiana told you may be true. Clement's gaze returned to her. You believe that? I believe kindness should not be erased merely because suspicion is convenient. For a moment, neither spoke. Miriam could see that he had expected something else from her, perhaps eagerness, perhaps triumph. You do not seem interested in proving her false, he said. I am interested in knowing what is true. Those are not always the same thing. No. He leaned back slightly. My mother's approval mattered to me more than I admitted. After my father's disgrace, everything in this house became about repair. Debts, reputation, invitations, alliances. My mother understood that better than anyone. His mouth tightened. After she died, Georgiana seemed to offer continuity. She knew the house. She remembered things my mother had said. She spoke of private moments with such certainty that I believed she had been trusted with something I had missed. Miriam understood then. This was not only about a melody. Clement had been listening for his mother's voice through another woman. Kindness is not the same as blessing a marriage, she said. No. And being welcomed into a room is not the same as being chosen for another person's future. Clement's face changed slightly. No, the words came harder this time. Before Miriam could say more, Lord Stradwick entered without waiting to be announced. His expression was controlled now, which made him more formidable than anger had. Hatherden, we need to settle this before the entire county decides your house has lost its senses. Clement rose. The county has survived worse. My daughter may not. The Earl glanced at Miriam, then back at Clement. Resume the ceremony privately tomorrow, or issue a statement that this morning's interruption was caused by a misunderstanding over music. Miriam felt the trap instantly. A misunderstanding would preserve Georgiana. It would also make Miriam a fool. Clement's voice remained level. I will issue no statement I know to be false. Lord Stradwick stepped closer. Do you imagine this concerns only honor? My estate has been under pressure for years. Georgiana's marriage would have secured settlements, credit, and stability. You knew that. Clement's face tightened. I knew there were obligations. Obligations? Lord Stradwick laughed without humor. 3 farms are mortgaged. 2 creditors extended terms because they expected the Hatherden alliance to proceed. If you destroy this marriage publicly, you do not merely embarrass my daughter. You expose my family to men who have been waiting for weakness. Miriam watched Clement. For the first time, Lord Stradwick's desperation had a shape. Not only pride, money, property, credit, a future narrowing around him. It did not make him right. It made him more dangerous. Clement said, Your finances do not alter what happened in the chapel. No, but they alter what happens next. Lord Stradwick turned toward Miriam. And you, Miss Dallow, should understand the cost of being correct in a room where everyone else has something to lose. Miriam met his gaze. I understand cost, my lord. Do you? Yes. Her voice remained quiet, more often than men with estates imagine. Clement looked at her, but she kept her eyes on Lord Stradwick. The Earl's expression hardened. Then he turned back to Clement. You are choosing a stranger's memory over a woman your mother loved. Clement answered at once. No, I am refusing to confuse the two. Lord Stradwick left without another word. The room seemed colder after he was gone. Clement remained standing. Miriam looked toward the open doors, then back at him. Your mother truly cared for Lady Georgiana. Yes, and Lady Georgiana knew the missing ornament. Yes, then perhaps the question is not whether she invented everything. Clement's gaze sharpened. What is the question? Miriam looked toward the shelves holding the late Duchess's music. How much truth did she need before she could build the rest? Before Clement could answer, Mr. Bellamy appeared in the doorway. His expression had changed. Your Grace. What is it? I have checked the old inventory connected to Her Grace's private sitting room. Clement went still. And Mr. Bellamy held out a worn ledger. One item is missing, a black Morocco music book kept beside the late Duchess during the final year of her life. Miriam felt a chill move through her. What was in it? Mr. Bellamy looked down at the entry. Private arrangements, favorite pieces, handwritten remarks, personal dedications. Clement's face lost color. Miriam looked toward the silent shelves. Somewhere between genuine affection and deliberate deception, a book containing the late Duchess' private musical world had disappeared, and the woman Clement had nearly married, had known a melody that had never been meant for strangers. By the time Mr. Bellamy finished reading the inventory entry aloud, the missing black Morocco music book had become more troubling than the damaged score itself. A scraped bar could have been altered in a few minutes. A missing book suggested years of silence. Clement took the worn ledger from the steward and read the notation himself. His eyes moved slowly over the list. Private arrangements, favorite pieces, handwritten remarks, personal dedications. Miriam watched his face harden, not with anger alone, but with the realization that part of his mother's private world had disappeared without his knowledge. Who had access to her sitting room? He asked. Mr. Bellamy answered carefully. Her dresser, 2 senior maids, her companion, members of the family, and certain visitors she admitted regularly. Clement looked up, Lady Georgiana among them. Yes, Your Grace. Miriam felt the danger of the conclusion before anyone spoke it. Access was not guilt. Affection was not theft. A missing book was not proof of who had taken it. She said nothing. Clement noticed anyway. You disagree? No. Miriam met his gaze. I am trying not to agree too quickly. Something almost like recognition passed through his expression. Then let us begin with what can be checked. He turned to Mr. Bellamy. The chapel cabinet. The steward nodded. I have already examined it, Your Grace. It was locked when I arrived after the ceremony. Any damage? None. How many keys open it, Mr.? Bellamy hesitated only briefly. 4 authorized keys. 1 held by the chaplain, 1 by me. 1 belongs to the regular organist, though it has remained in my keeping since his illness. The household master key can also open the cabinet. Clement's gaze sharpened. Where was the master key last night? That pause was longer. It was requested shortly after dinner. Miriam felt the room change. Clement did not raise his voice. By whom? The request came through Lady Georgiana's maid. Mr. Bellamy continued before anyone could interrupt. I was told her ladyship wished to place fresh flowers in the chapel near the memorial tablet of the late Duchess. Clement looked toward the open doorway. Was the key returned? Within half an hour. By Georgiana? By her maid? Miriam remembered leaving the chapel after rehearsal. She had placed the score in the cabinet herself. The 7th bar had still been there. Clement turned toward her. You are certain the manuscript was intact before you locked it away? Yes, no doubt. None. He nodded once. Send for Lady Georgiana. When she entered 10 minutes later, she wore a pale grey gown instead of bridal white. The change should have made her look less exposed. It did not. Lord Stradwick followed her. His expression so controlled that his anger seemed more dangerous than before. Georgiana stopped near the center of the room. I was told you had questions. Clement remained standing beside the table. Did you enter the chapel last night? Yes, Lord Stradwick shifted, but Georgiana continued. I wished to leave flowers for your mother. You knew I often did so. Did you use the household master key? My maid requested it for me. Did you open the music cabinet? No. Did you go to the organ loft? No. Clement's face revealed nothing. Did you touch the wedding anthem? Georgiana's eyes flashed. No. Lord Stradwick stepped forward. This is absurd. My daughter enters a chapel to honor the woman who cared for her, and suddenly she is treated as though she has committed some disgraceful act. Miriam saw Clement's jaw tighten. No accusation has been made. Not allowed. Lord Stradwick turned his attention toward Miriam. Yet, Miriam felt the insult before the words arrived. We have already indulged one hired musician's memory at the cost of a marriage. Must we now build a prosecution from flowers and keys? Clement's voice cooled. There is no prosecution. Then send her away and end this. Miriam had endured condescension before. She had expected it. What she had not expected was how quickly her body reacted to being spoken of as though she were furniture. Her hands tightened at her sides. Georgiana noticed. Miss Dallow seems distressed. Miriam looked at her. I am not distressed, my lady. No. Georgiana's tone softened. You have become remarkably central to Hatherden affairs for someone who came only to catalogue music. Lord Stradwick gave a low laugh. A remarkable rise indeed. Miriam felt heat climb into her face. The accusation was plain enough now. A woman without fortune, a duke's attention, a stopped wedding. Society would right the rest. Clement spoke. Enough. But Miriam had already answered. Your daughter's wedding did not require my ambition to fail. Silence fell. The words were too sharp. Miriam knew it immediately. Georgiana's face changed. Lord Stradwick's eyes hardened. Clement looked at Miriam, not in rebuke, but with surprise. Miriam drew a slow breath. That was unfairly said. Her voice remained steady, though the heat in her face deepened. I withdraw the manner, not the fact that the manuscript was altered. Georgiana stared at her. For the first time, Miriam saw something more complicated than anger in her expression. Hurt. Not because of Miriam, perhaps. Because the wedding had failed. Because Hatherden had been nearly hers. Because Clement's mother had once truly welcomed her, and now that history stood under suspicion. The glimpse vanished quickly. Georgiana said, "How disciplined of you." Miriam did not answer. Clement turned back to the matter at hand. Yesterday, before rehearsal, did you ask Miss Dallow whether old ink could be removed without destroying paper? Georgiana's gaze shifted. I may have asked some question about restoration. Miriam watched her carefully. You asked whether old ink could be removed while leaving the page usable. And what of it? Nothing by itself. Georgiana looked almost disappointed. How cautious. Only when I do not know enough. Lord Stradwick made an impatient sound. Then we are finished. No proof, no witness, no confession. Only the recollections of a woman who has every reason to enjoy her sudden importance. This time Clement's response came quietly. Miss Dallow has already lost more peace than she has gained attention. You know very little about what she wants, and you know less. Lord Stradwick stepped closer. Be careful, Hatherden. Your father nearly ruined this family because he thought consequence was something that happened to other men. Something flashed across Clement's face. Miriam saw it. Pain, old and controlled. She also saw Georgiana see it. That was the second moment that unsettled her. Georgiana's expression softened before she could stop it. Genuine recognition. She knew where the wound was. Perhaps she had known for years. Clement said, "My father believed reputation could replace truth. I will not repeat that mistake." Lord Stradwick's face closed. Then you may discover the cost of your virtue. He turned toward Georgiana. Come. She did not move at once. Her gaze drifted toward the old ledger on the table, then toward the shelves, only for a second. Miriam noticed. Clement did too. Georgiana looked back at him. Your mother trusted me. Clement's expression changed. I know. The answer seemed to strike harder than denial might have. Georgiana swallowed. Then do not let a missing book turn every kindness she gave me into suspicion. Miriam felt the truth inside that plea. Not innocence, not proof, something more dangerous. Georgiana had been loved here, at least once. Perhaps that was why losing Hatherden now felt to her like being expelled from a place she had spent years convincing herself was already hers. She left with her father. When the door closed, Clement remained still for several moments. Miriam did not speak. At last he looked at her. You were right. About what? Not agreeing too quickly. Before she could answer, Mr. Bellamy returned with another section of the inventory and placed it beside the first. There is one more detail, Your Grace. Clement opened the page. Miriam moved closer. The notation beside the black Morocco book had been amended in another hand. The volume had not merely been stored in the late Duchess's sitting room. During the final year of her life, it had been kept on the small table beside her chair, close enough to reach without rising. Miriam read the line twice. Clement's face lost colour. She kept it beside her. "Yes, Your Grace," Mr. Bellamy said. Miriam looked toward the silent shelves. A book containing private music, handwritten remarks, and personal dedications had vanished from the room of a dying duchess. Georgiana had possessed legitimate access to that room. She had later known an unpublished ornament hidden inside the missing seventh bar. And now, after being questioned, she had looked toward the shelves before leaving. The mystery had narrowed, not enough for accusation, enough for fear. By morning, the missing black Morocco book had become more than an object no one could find. It had become a question Clement could not dismiss without questioning his own memory of his mother. Miriam understood that before he said a word. She found him in the music room shortly after breakfast, standing beside the window seat where the late Duchess had once listened to music in the mornings. The doors were open to the corridor. A maid crossed the far end carrying linens, and Mr. Bellamy moved in and out with old catalogues. Nothing about the arrangement was improper, yet the room still felt private, because Clement was looking at a small green prayer book as though it had spoken to him. "You found something," Miriam said. He turned. "Perhaps." She approached the table. The book was narrow, its cloth faded at the corners. Clement opened the cover and showed her the inscription. The handwriting was elegant but uneven with age. "To dear Georgiana, who brings quiet where others bring noise. With affection, E. Somerby." Miriam read it twice. Clement watched her. "My mother gave it to her." "Yes, that is her hand. I believe you. And the date is from the final year of her life." Miriam nodded. The discovery did not weaken the mystery. It made it more difficult. Georgiana had not invented every kindness. The late Duchess had truly valued her presence. Perhaps that was why the missing book mattered so much. Lies built from nothing were often easier to expose. A lie built around a genuine tenderness could survive because part of it deserved to be believed. Clement closed the prayer book. "You are not surprised." "I am. You do not look it." Miriam glanced at him. Would surprise alter the inscription? Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. "No." She looked back at the faded writing. "Your mother cared for Lady Georgiana." "Yes. That should remain true even if other things prove false." Clement studied her. Most people would be eager to destroy the whole story. That would be easier. You do not like easier answers, not when they require changing the past. His gaze lowered to the book. "I spent years believing Georgiana understood my mother in ways I did not." Miriam heard the wound beneath the words. Perhaps she understood some things, and perhaps she learned others from a book that was never hers. He said it quietly, but the bitterness was there. Miriam did not answer at once. She knew what it was to miss someone and preserve details until memory became almost a room of its own. Her father had been gone for years, yet she still heard him whenever she tuned an instrument or saw ink blotted carelessly across a score. Grief could make a person tender. It could also make a person easy to deceive. Clement turned toward the window seat. She used to sit there. Miriam followed his gaze. The cushion had been replaced, but the place itself retained a domestic intimacy absent from the rest of Hatherden's formal rooms. "Your mother?" "Yes, after breakfast, when she was well enough." He picked up a green-bound music volume from the table. "She played poorly." Miriam looked at him. That is a severe judgment. It is an accurate one. Perhaps she disagreed. She did, frequently. Miriam almost smiled. Clement noticed. You find this amusing? A little. You defend a woman you never knew against her own son. Only musically. Cruel. The word was so dry that the smile escaped before Miriam could prevent it. For one moment, the room changed. Clement looked less like the Duke who had stopped a wedding before half the county, and more like a son remembering a mother who had once played too loudly and refused correction. The warmth passed quickly, but neither pretended it had not been there. Miriam turned toward the shelves. If the black morocco book was kept beside her chair, there may be references to it in other volumes. Clement joined her. What should I look for? The question surprised her. Dukes usually assigned work. They did not ask how to help. She pointed toward the lower shelf. Loose notes, dedications, anything in the Duchess's hand, but do not decide what it means before I see it. Clement glanced at her. Again, you distrust my musical judgment. Deeply. This time he did smile, though only for a second. They searched for less than an hour. Miriam refused to turn the room into an endless archive excavation. Most volumes yielded nothing. One contained a dried sprig of lavender. Another held a page torn from an old hymn book. Clement found a small card with Georgiana's name in the late Duchess's hand, attached to a simple arrangement of a Scottish air. Miriam examined it carefully. Another gift. It appears so. Then she was not merely tolerated here. Clement's face tightened. No. Miriam placed the card beside the prayer book. That matters. Why? Because if Lady Georgiana later used private material dishonestly, we should know what she was given freely before deciding what she took. Clement was silent. Then he said, a true kindness can still be used dishonestly later. Miriam looked at him. Yes, he had taken the words from the thought she had not spoken. The recognition between them was brief and unsettling. She turned away first. On the next shelf, behind a thick collection of sacred music, she found a folded copyist's note. The paper was old and brittle. Miriam opened it carefully. The reference was short. A voluntary by Mr. Dallow. 8-bar closing cadence, prepared at the request of Her Grace the Duchess of Hatherden. The date made Miriam's breath catch. What is it? Clement asked. She handed him the note. The cadence existed years before Lady Georgiana said your mother played it privately for her. He read the date. How many years? 12. Clement's expression darkened. Miriam continued before he could leap too quickly toward certainty. It proves the music existed. It does not prove your mother never played it for Georgiana. You cannot help yourself. What do you mean? You rescue inconvenient facts from convenient conclusions. Miriam considered that. Someone should. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, very quietly, yes. The second scene unfolded later that afternoon, when the room had grown calmer and the old prayer book, the Scottish air, and the dated copyist's note lay together on the table. Miriam opened her leather case and took out the small brass tuning fork that had belonged to her father. Clement noticed immediately. You carry that with you? Always. Why? She held it between two fingers. My father used it before lessons, performances, even before examining an unfamiliar instrument. A superstition? He would have been offended. Then I withdraw the accusation. Miriam struck the tuning fork lightly against the wooden edge of the table. A clear note rose into the room. Both listened. He said, you should never trust a room until you have heard its true pitch. Clement looked around the music room. And what is the true pitch of Hatherden? In the past, Miriam might have answered with something polished. something about silence or grief or deception. Instead, she hesitated. The truth was less elegant. "I don't know yet." Clement looked at her. That answer seemed to affect him more than certainty would have. "Good," he said. Miriam raised an eyebrow. "Good? It is the first time today you have not tried to save me from a conclusion. Perhaps I am tired. Then I am grateful for fatigue." She almost laughed again. The note from the tuning fork faded. Miriam placed it back in its case. Clement looked toward the dated copyist's note. "The music existed 12 years earlier. Georgiana truly knew my mother. My mother truly cared for her. And yet the Black Morocco book is gone. Yes, you still do not think that is enough. Enough to suspect, not enough to know." His gaze remained on her. "And if suspicion becomes certainty?" Miriam thought of Georgiana's face when she had said, "Your mother trusted me." The hurt had been real. That was what troubled her. Then the truth will be harder than a simple lie. Clement frowned slightly. "Why?" Miriam looked toward the prayer book with Georgiana's name written inside. "Because people rarely steal what means nothing to them." Silence followed. Not empty, not comfortable, honest. Then Mr. Bellamy entered, carrying a narrow slip of paper found among old household accounts. He placed it on the table. "Your Grace, Miss Dallow, I found one further reference to Mr. Dallow's voluntary." Miriam read it first. The line confirmed the same 8-bar cadence in a copy prepared years before Georgiana's claimed private exchange. Clement read over her shoulder. The chronology was now fixed. The music existed. The unusual 7th bar existed. Georgiana knew it. Yet the late Duchess had also genuinely cared for her. Miriam looked toward the shelves and felt the mystery deepen rather than narrow. The question was no longer whether Georgiana had invented everything. The more dangerous question was why a woman who had truly been welcomed at Hatherden had needed to claim more than she had been given. The dated copyist's note remained on the table. Long after Miriam had finished reading it, 12 years separated the original 8-bar cadence from the story Georgiana had told Clement. And the distance between those dates mattered. It did not prove that the late Duchess had never played the melody for her. It did prove that the unusual 7th bar had existed long before Georgiana described it as though it were part of an intimate exchange created only for her. Clement stood beside the window, one hand resting against the frame. "She told me my mother called the passage unfinished until the right person heard it." Miriam looked at the paper again. "Your mother may have said something similar." "You do not believe that?" "I do not know what she said." He turned toward her. "The date makes Georgiana's story impossible. The date breaks the version she gave you." Miriam paused. "It does not yet tell us who built the replacement." Clement's expression tightened. "You mean the lie?" "Perhaps. You are still unwilling to call it that." "Not entirely." He studied her for a moment. "You were less careful when you told Lord Stradwick his daughter's wedding did not require your ambition to fail." The memory sent heat into Miriam's face. "I deserved that." "I was not rebuking you." "No, that makes it worse." Something close to amusement touched his face. "Does it?" Miriam gathered the loose papers into a neater stack. "I dislike saying more than I can defend. Even when someone deserves it, especially then." Clement looked toward the old prayer book bearing Georgiana's name. "My mother cared for her. That much is true." "Yes." "And Georgiana knew the music." "Yes." But if she had truly been given the passage in the way she claimed, why alter the score at all? Miriam looked at him. That was the right question. The erased 7th bar did not simply hide a melody. It removed the one place where memory could become evidence. Perhaps someone feared comparison, she said. Between what and what? Between what, Lady Georgiana said she knew, and what the original page could prove. Before Clement could answer, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Georgiana appeared at the open doors. She wore deep blue now, a color that made her face look paler and more composed. In one hand she held a folded note. She did not acknowledge Clement at first. Her gaze went directly to Miriam. "I would like to speak with Miss Dallow." Clement's expression cooled. "You may do so here. I assumed as much." Georgiana stepped into the room. After all, everyone seems to require witnesses now. Miriam remained standing beside the table. "What is it, my lady?" Georgiana approached and placed the folded note before her. "Read that." Miriam hesitated, then opened it. The handwriting was the same as the inscription inside the prayer book, the late Duchess's hand. The note was brief. "My dear Georgiana, you made the morning easier. Come again Thursday if you can. I should like the Scottish air once more. Even if Clement insists I play it badly." Miriam read the final line twice. Clement had gone still. Georgiana watched him, and for one brief moment the hardness left her face. "She did love me," she said. Clement answered quietly. "Yes." The word carried no accusation. Somehow that seemed to wound Georgiana more. She turned back to Miriam. "You look surprised." "I am not surprised that the Duchess cared for you." "No?" "No." "Then perhaps you finally understand that I did not need to steal a place in this house." Miriam looked at the note. Being loved does not answer what happened to the manuscript. Georgiana's eyes sharpened. There it is, always the page. Because the page was altered, and because pages are safer than people. Miriam felt the words land. Georgiana stepped closer. "Do you understand what it is to be loved in a house that never meant to keep you?" The question was not theatrical. That was what made it dangerous. Miriam saw, suddenly, the younger woman Georgiana must once have been. Welcomed into the late Duchess's sitting room, given books, sent for in bad weather, told she brought quiet where others brought noise. Close enough to feel chosen, never close enough to belong. Miriam did not soften the truth, but she did not deny the pain, perhaps not in the way you mean. Georgiana's mouth tightened. "No, you were never expected to become part of Hatherden. Neither were you, unless the Duke chose it." The hurt vanished behind anger, and now he hesitates because of you. Miriam felt her own temper rise, but this time she caught it before it became cruelty. "No, he hesitates because one bar was erased, and because you knew what was inside it." Georgiana's fingers closed around the edge of the table. "Your father sold music, did he not? He was paid for his work. Then perhaps nothing was stolen. Perhaps the Duchess could share whatever she wished. Perhaps she did." Georgiana blinked, disarmed for an instant. Miriam continued. "That is why the missing book matters. We need to know what was given freely and what was not." Georgiana laughed softly. "You make suspicion sound almost virtuous." "No, only necessary. And profitable." Miriam went still. Georgiana's voice lowered. "You should think carefully, Miss Dallow. You are 36, unmarried, without fortune. You earn your living because families like mine decide whether your work is worth paying for." Clement stepped forward. "That is enough." Miriam looked at him. "No." The word came before she could reconsider. Clement stopped. Georgiana's eyes flickered with surprise. Miriam kept her gaze on her. "You are correct about one thing, my lady. My livelihood is fragile." "Then act like it." Miriam felt the insult, but beneath it she heard fear. Fragility does not change the number of bars. Georgiana's face hardened completely. Then perhaps tomorrow evening will settle this. Clement frowned. What happens tomorrow evening? Georgiana turned toward him. The county musical supper. It is cancelled. No. Her answer came too quickly. Too many guests have accepted. Musicians have been engaged. If you cancel now, society will assume shame, impropriety, or guilt. Let it. Easy for a duke to say. The bitterness in her voice was real. You remain a duke after scandal. Women do not remain unchanged by it. Clement's expression shifted, but before he answered, another voice came from the doorway. She is right. Lord Stradwick entered without waiting to be announced. He looked tired now, not merely angry. The strain around his mouth had deepened since morning. The supper proceeds. Clement turned toward him. You do not decide what happens in my house. No, but you should know what happens outside it. Lord Stradwick's gaze moved to Miriam. 2 creditors have already written to my agent. They heard the marriage did not take place. One has requested immediate reassurance regarding an obligation that was extended on the expectation of this alliance. Clement said nothing. Lord Stradwick continued. 3 farms are mortgaged. Georgiana's settlement was to stabilize more than her future. If you destroy this alliance publicly, you do not merely humiliate my daughter. You expose my family to men who have been waiting for weakness. Miriam saw Georgiana look away. There was shame in that movement, and resentment. Perhaps she had spent years being told that her marriage would rescue not only herself, but everyone attached to her name. Clement's voice remained even. Your finances do not determine whether I marry your daughter. No, but they explain why we will not meekly accept being ruined by a woman with a memory for music. Miriam felt the old anger stir, but she refused to let him choose her words for her. Georgiana moved toward the instrument at the far end of the room. There is a simpler answer. She placed one hand on its closed lid. Tomorrow evening, Miss Dallow can play the anthem exactly as it now appears. Miriam looked at her. Georgiana's expression was composed again. 7 bars. Nothing added. Nothing invented. Clement's face darkened. No, Georgiana ignored him. If she plays it, perhaps everyone can stop pretending that her memory is more important than what is actually written. Miriam understood the trap immediately. If she played the altered version, she would make the lie sound complete. If she refused, society would call her difficult, vain, and unreliable. The very people who might employ her would be watching. Lord Stradwick saw that she understood. You said you know the cost of being correct, Miss Dallow. His voice was quiet now. Tomorrow evening, perhaps you will prove it. Georgiana looked at Miriam one last time. Play what is written. Then she left the room with her father. The doors remained open behind them. Clement turned toward Miriam. You are under no obligation to perform. She looked at the silent instrument, then at the dated note, proving 8 bars had existed long before Georgiana's story. For the first time, the mystery had become something more dangerous than a question of truth. It had become a choice between conscience and survival. Miriam did not answer at once. Clement's words remained between them. You are under no obligation to perform. She believed him. That was precisely what made the decision difficult. A command could be resisted. A choice had to be owned. The dated copyist's note lay on the table. 8 bars had existed years before Georgiana's story. The 7th had been removed. The black Morocco book was missing. Georgiana had known the ornament. None of that changed because a room full of county families preferred comfort to uncertainty. Miriam looked toward the instrument. If I refuse, they will say I created the difficulty, and now refuse the simplest way to settle it. Clement's expression hardened. Then they will be wrong. Wrong people still withdraw commissions. He said nothing, she continued. Lady Georgiana knows that. So does her father. Clement moved closer, but stopped well before the distance became intimate. Then, do not give them more of yourself than you choose. Miriam looked at him. That sounds simple. It is not. No. His voice lowered. But whatever you choose, I will not call it disobedience. The word struck somewhere deeper than Miriam expected. She had spent much of her life being permitted to do things other people wanted. Teach this child, copy this score, play this hymn, travel on Thursday, remain until the guests depart, leave before dinner. There were always choices, but most came already narrowed by money, propriety, and the good opinion of people who could afford not to need her. Clement was not telling her what would please him. He was telling her the decision belonged to her. Miriam looked away before that recognition showed too clearly. The supper proceeds. Then, only if you wish it. It was arranged before the wedding. Yes, if it is cancelled now, they will still talk. They are already talking. Then perhaps cancellation gives them the luxury of inventing the ending. Clement's eyes sharpened. And you would rather give them one? I would rather choose where I stand when they make their judgment. A faint tension moved through his face. You intend to attend? Yes. And perform? Miriam looked toward the score. 7 visible bars, 1 erased truth. I have not decided. Clement seemed about to say more, then stopped himself. That restraint did not go unnoticed. Very well, he said. You decide at the instrument. By the following evening, Hatherden Court glowed with candlelight, polished silver, and the kind of elegance used to disguise collective curiosity. The musical supper had drawn more guests than originally expected. Some had received invitations weeks earlier. Others had found reasons to be nearby after news of the halted wedding spread through the county. No one admitted to coming for scandal. Miriam recognized the lie because society had dressed it beautifully. She stood near the edge of the music room while guests entered in silks, satins, dark evening coats, and expressions of practiced concern. Lady Berwick greeted Clement with grave courtesy, then glanced at Miriam for half a second too long. Mrs. Armitage offered a small nod. Sir Edwin Vale, who had once praised Miriam's memory after hearing her play in Bath, looked away before she could greet him. The message was clear. Her skill had not changed. Their confidence in being seen to admire it had. Across the room, Georgiana moved among the guests in pale blue silk. She appeared composed, gracious, almost serene. Anyone unaware of the previous day might have mistaken her for the hostess, rather than the bride whose wedding had been stopped. Lord Stradwick remained near the fireplace, speaking quietly to 3 men Miriam knew by reputation. One had commissioned chamber music for his daughter. Another recommended teachers to half the county. The third had influence in London. Lord Stradwick never looked at Miriam while speaking to them. He did not need to. Clement stood several yards away. He did not hover. He did not watch Miriam so obviously that anyone could accuse him of favoritism. Yet each time she looked up, she found his attention not fixed on her alone, but on the room around her. He was listening to what was not being said. That mattered more than proximity. A quartet performed first. Then a young woman sang an Italian air with enough beauty to quiet even the most determined whisperers. Miriam tried to listen. She failed. Her attention kept returning to the instrument at the far end of the room. The altered score waited on its stand. Mr. Bellamy had brought it from the chapel. under Clement's order, and placed it there without touching the damaged section. The pale scar between the 6th and 8th bars could be seen from several feet away. Georgiana approached when the final applause faded. She did not look at Clement. She looked at Miriam. "Shall we end this unpleasantness?" The room grew quieter. Miriam felt it happen. Conversations softened. Fans stilled. People pretended not to watch. Georgiana crossed to the instrument and rested one hand beside the score. "Play the anthem." Clement spoke before Miriam moved. "Miss Dallow is free to decline." Georgiana turned toward him. "Of course." Her smile was small. "That is what makes the choice so revealing." Lord Stradwick stepped away from the fireplace. No one asks for heroics, only music. Miriam felt the trap close again. If she played, they would say the score was accepted. If she refused, they would say she preferred scandal to work. Georgiana's voice softened. 7 bars, Miss Dallow. Nothing more. Play what is written. A few guests glanced at Miriam. Others looked at Clement. She hated that. She did not want his face to decide what hers should do. Clement seemed to understand. He kept his expression unreadable. He would not command her in either direction. Miriam walked toward the instrument. Each step seemed louder than it should have. She passed Lady Berwick, who lowered her eyes. She passed Mrs. Armitage, whose fingers tightened around her fan. She passed Lord Stradwick, who watched with the patience of a man certain that economics would succeed where insult had failed. Miriam reached the bench and sat. The room became still. She looked down at the score. The first 6 bars were unchanged. The 7th was gone. The 8th waited after the scar, innocent and complete, as though nothing had been interrupted. Miriam placed her hands above the keys. For one moment, she imagined surrender. 7 bars, less than a minute of music. A small compromise no one would punish her for. Perhaps Lady Berwick would still employ her. Perhaps Mrs. Armitage would still trust her with a daughter's instruction. Perhaps tomorrow would be quieter. Her fingers trembled once. She lowered them slightly, then stopped. She remembered her father correcting her as a girl when she tried to smooth over a wrong note by playing faster. A mistake hidden by grace was still a mistake. She remembered Georgiana asking whether old ink could be removed without destroying paper. She remembered the scraped fibers. She remembered Clement saying he would not call her choice disobedience. Miriam lifted her hands away from the keys. Georgiana's smile faded. No sound came. Lord Stradwick stepped forward. "Miss Dallow." Miriam lowered her hands into her lap. Georgiana's voice sharpened. "Begin." Miriam did not. A whisper moved through the room. Someone shifted in a chair. Clement remained where he was. He did not rescue her. He did not need to. This was her decision now. Georgiana stared at her. "Are you refusing to play what is written?" Miriam rose slowly from the bench. Fear moved through her, cold and real. She thought of lost commissions, delayed payments, empty months. She thought of how easily society forgave powerful people for cruelty and punished dependent women for inconvenience. Then she looked at the altered page. "Yes," she said. The word carried farther than she expected. The room fell silent. Miriam turned from the instrument and faced them all. She knew what would come next: the accusation, the humiliation, the cost. But for the first time since the wedding stopped, she was not reacting to what someone else had erased. She was choosing what she would not become part of. I will not play a lie merely because it has been written neatly. Miriam's voice was not loud, yet it carried across the music room with greater force than the anthem would have done. For a moment, no one moved. The guests stared at her from their chairs, their expressions ranging from shock to fascination. Georgiana stood beside the instrument, one hand resting near the altered score. Lord Stradwick's face darkened. Clement remained several yards away, exactly where Miriam had left him. He had not stepped forward to save her from the silence. He had understood that the silence belonged to her. Georgiana recovered first. "A lie?" she asked. "You accuse me of lying because you dislike what is written on a page?" Miriam kept her hands at her sides. "I said the score has been altered." "You called it a lie because the seventh bar existed when I rehearsed it." It was later scraped away. A murmur moved through the room. Georgiana lifted her chin. "According to your memory." "Yes, and we are all expected to value that memory above the manuscript itself." Miriam looked at the pale damage between the 6th and 8th bars. "The manuscript itself shows that something was removed." Lord Stradwick stepped forward. "Removed by whom, I do not know." "Then you admit you have no accusation." "I have made none beyond what I can support." The Earl gave a short laugh. "How disciplined." Miriam felt the sting, but refused to answer it. She had already learned that every unnecessary sentence could become another weapon in someone else's hand. Georgiana watched her carefully. "Then say only what you know." "I intend to." Miriam turned slightly so the room could hear her clearly. "Yesterday, the final cadence contained 8 bars. Today it contains 7. The 7th was scraped from the page." Lady Georgiana knew the distinctive ornament inside that missing bar before I came to Hatherden. The silence deepened. Georgiana's expression hardened. "And you expect everyone here to believe that, because you say so." Clement spoke for the first time. "She is not the only person who remembers it." Every face turned toward him. He did not move closer to Miriam. "Lady Georgiana described the ornament to me 6 months before Miss Dallow arrived at Hatherden." Georgiana looked at him. "Because your mother played it for me." Perhaps she did. Clement's answer surprised the room. Miriam saw Georgiana falter. Clement continued. "My mother cared for you. I do not deny that." The words seemed to wound Georgiana more than disbelief would have. She looked away. Lord Stradwick intervened. "Then there is your answer. The late Duchess played the music for my daughter. Miss Dallow has constructed an insult from nothing." Miriam met his gaze. "No, my lord, there is still the erased bar. A bar of music. Yes, not a murder, not a theft. Music." His contempt was deliberate. Miriam felt heat rise in her face. "A thing does not become unimportant because you do not value it." Lord Stradwick's mouth tightened. Georgiana stepped nearer. "You are very bold for a woman in your position." Miriam looked at her. "What position is that? Must I say it?" Georgiana's voice softened into something more dangerous than anger. "You are 36 years old, unmarried, without fortune. You earn your living because families with money choose to employ you. Before this week, half the people in this room did not know your name. Now you have stopped a duke's wedding, remained in his house, and refused to perform before his guests. Forgive me if I question whether invisibility has suddenly become inconvenient for you." A few guests looked away. Miriam felt the blow land, not because it was true, but because it was crafted from truths. Her age, her poverty, her dependence, her invisibility, all of it real. Georgiana had simply arranged those facts into a cruelty. Miriam breathed once before answering. "My poverty does not alter the page." Georgiana's face changed. Miriam continued. "My age does not alter it. My unmarried state does not alter it. There were 8 bars. Now there are 7. The room went completely still. Lord Stradwick looked toward Clement. "And you will permit this?" Clement's expression cooled. Permit what? This woman to insult the woman you intended to marry. Lady Georgiana challenged Miss Dallow's honesty. Miss Dallow answered. She refused to perform. Yes, and you defend that. Clement looked directly at him. No one under my roof will be forced to falsify her judgment as a musician because an earl finds the truth inconvenient. The words changed the room. Miriam felt it immediately. Some guests shifted, others lowered their eyes. Georgiana stared at Clement as if he had struck a door shut between them. You defend her very quickly. Clement did not answer. Georgiana pressed harder. Why? His gaze remained steady. Because you are attacking her for refusing to lie. Miriam felt something tighten beneath her ribs. She did not want gratitude. She did not want rescue. Yet the distinction mattered. Clement was not telling the room she was noble, innocent, or admirable. He was naming exactly what had happened. She had refused to play. Georgiana turned toward her. Then let us be honest about the cost of your virtue. Do you think these people will trust you after tonight? Miriam looked around the room. Lady Berwick avoided her gaze. Mrs. Armitage stared at her folded fan. Sir Edwin Vale stood near the wall, suddenly fascinated by a painting he had ignored all evening. Miriam understood the answer before Georgiana gave it. You need commissions, Georgiana said. You need recommendations. You need people to believe you are agreeable, steady, and discreet. Yet you have made yourself the center of a scandal. Miriam felt fear then, real fear. It moved through her with cold clarity, not abstract fear of gossip, rent, food, travel, music paper, the cost of remaining independent. Georgiana saw the hesitation and smiled faintly. There, at last. Miriam looked back at the score. For one moment, she imagined how easy it would have been to play. Less than a minute. 7 bars. A lie made graceful. Then she raised her eyes. Yes, she said. Georgiana frowned. Yes, I am afraid. The admission surprised the room. Miriam continued before anyone could use it against her. I am afraid of losing work. I am afraid that people who once trusted my judgment will decide I am troublesome because I refuse to make something false sound complete. I am afraid of what this may cost me. Georgiana watched her. Then play. Miriam shook her head. No, the word was soft, final. Fear does not change what I know. She stepped away from the instrument. No one applauded. Miriam was grateful. Applause would have turned the moment into performance. This was not performance. It was cost. The gathering did not end immediately, but it never recovered. Conversation returned in fragments. A violinist attempted another piece. Few listened. Lord Stradwick moved among the guests with controlled injury, speaking quietly to those whose opinions mattered. Miriam knew what he was doing. Anger would have made him look vindictive. Restraint made him look credible. 20 minutes later, she left the music room and stood alone in the corridor outside the archive. Her hands were trembling now. She pressed them together until they stopped. Clement found her there. He did not approach too closely. That cost you something, he said. Miriam looked at him. Yes. He seemed to search for another sentence, then abandoned it. I should have ended the gathering. No, you do not know what I was going to say. You would have emptied the room for me. Clement's jaw tightened. Perhaps. Then everyone would say I could only withstand judgment because a duke removed the judges. He looked at her for a long moment. You wanted to stand there alone. No. Miriam's honesty surprised even her. I wanted not to need to. Something changed in his face. Before he could answer, Miriam continued. But I did. Clement lowered his head once. Yes. The next morning, 2 letters waited beside Miriam's breakfast plate. Both were polite. Both expressed regret. Lady Berwick no longer required the autumn chapel arrangement. Mrs. Armitage had decided her daughter's musical instruction would be undertaken elsewhere. A third note arrived before noon. Payment for work Miriam had already completed would be delayed. She carried the letters to her room and closed the door. Then she opened her purse. She counted what remained. Once, twice, enough for several weeks if she was careful. Less if another payment failed. On the table beside her lay the small leather case containing her father's brass tuning fork. Miriam opened it. The metal caught the light. For one terrible second, she imagined selling it. The thought was so immediate that she closed the case at once and pressed both hands against it. She did not cry. She simply sat there, breathing slowly, while the full cost of the previous evening became real. Somewhere beyond her room, Hatherden continued as it always had. Bells rang. Doors opened. Servants crossed corridors. But Miriam understood now that someone had done more than attack her reputation. Someone was making sure that truth became expensive. By late afternoon, Miriam had begun to understand that losing work was not the only danger. Having it returned for the wrong reason could wound her more deeply. The discovery came in the form of a note from Lady Berwick. Miriam opened it at the archive table, expecting another apology disguised as courtesy. Instead, the message informed her that the autumn chapel arrangement would proceed after all. The change should have brought relief. It did not. The wording was too careful. Lady Berwick referred to a recent communication from the Duke of Hatherden and expressed confidence that any misunderstanding concerning Miriam's conduct had been exaggerated. Miriam read the sentence twice, then a third time. Her hands went cold. Clement entered the music room several minutes later and stopped when he saw the note in her hand. Miriam did not bother asking whether he knew what it contained. His expression answered for him. "You wrote to Lady Berwick?" Clement remained near the doorway. "Yes, without telling me." "Yes." She folded the letter once too sharply. "What did you say?" "That withdrawing a commission because you refused to perform an altered manuscript was unjust. You used your title. I used my name." Miriam looked at him. "Your name is a title." His jaw tightened. "I was trying to prevent Stradwick from damaging your livelihood by making my livelihood dependent upon your approval instead." Clement's expression hardened. "That is not what I did, isn't it?" "No." Lady Berwick changed her decision after hearing from a duke. "Do you think anyone will imagine she suddenly rediscovered her faith in my ability? Her original decision was influenced by pressure, and now the reversal was influenced by you." Clement stepped farther into the room. "Would you prefer that I did nothing while people punished you for telling the truth?" Miriam felt the fear from that morning return. The counted coins, the delayed payment, the thought of selling her father's tuning fork. She knew exactly what Clement had tried to prevent. That knowledge made the anger worse, not smaller. "I would prefer that you ask me before using your power to arrange my life." He went still. Miriam heard her own breath. She should have stopped there. She did not. "You have made my livelihood look like another room in your house that you may arrange when it displeases you." The words landed between them. Clement's face changed, not dramatically. That made the wound clearer. Miriam regretted the cruelty at once. She did not regret the boundary. "That was cruelly said," she said. "It was not entirely wrong." Clement looked away. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "No, it was not." Miriam had expected argument. The absence of it unsettled her. He crossed to the table but did not come too near. I saw the letters. I knew Stradwick was speaking to people who employed you. I thought if I corrected one false impression, others might follow. You thought influence could undo influence. Yes, without asking what it would cost me. Clement's gaze returned to hers. No. The answer was immediate, honest. I did not ask. Miriam looked down at Lady Berwick's letter. Now if I accept the commission, it will seem I kept it because you intervened. If I refuse, I lose the work anyway. Then I have made the choice narrower. Yes, the word hurt both of them. Clement drew a slow breath. I was wrong. Miriam looked up. He did not soften the admission with excuses. I used my rank where I should have asked your consent. The apology reached deeper than she wanted it to. She folded the letter more carefully this time. What will you do? Write again. Tell Lady Berwick that my opinion should not determine whom she employs. If she restores the commission, it must be because she trusts your work. If you accept, that must be your decision. Miriam studied him. You may make the situation more awkward. I already made it awkward. A faint, reluctant warmth moved through her despite herself. That is true, Clement almost smiled. Then his expression changed. There is another possibility. Miriam knew from his tone that she would not like it. What possibility? Remain at Hatherden. She said nothing. Clement continued. A permanent position. Full authority over the music archive. Your own schedule. Proper rooms. A salary sufficient to make Lord Stradwick's influence irrelevant. Miriam felt the temptation before she could deny it. Security. Regular income. No patron could withdraw a season of work with one letter. No delayed payment would force her to count coins in private. The offer was generous. It was also exactly what she feared. No, Clement's face closed slightly. You have not considered it. I have considered it for the last several seconds with dangerous sincerity. Then why refuse? Miriam looked around the music room. At the shelves, the open doors, the place where Clement's mother had once listened to music, because everyone would say I stopped your wedding and was rewarded with a permanent place in your house. I do not care what they say. I do. His expression sharpened. You care more for gossip than security. I care whether my security belongs to me. The words came out more quietly than the rest. Clement did not answer at once. Miriam continued. If I stay because you protect me from every consequence, how do I know who I am when this inquiry ends? You would still be yourself, would I? Yes, that is easy for you to say. Your place in the world does not depend upon someone else deciding whether you are convenient. Clement absorbed that without flinching. Miriam looked away. The next words frightened her more than the argument had. I want to know whether you will still wish to hear me when I have ceased to be useful to your inquiry. Silence followed. Clement did not answer quickly enough. Miriam felt the hurt arrive before she had time to defend herself against it. It was not sharp, it was worse. Quiet. She had known the danger already. He had noticed her because she stopped his wedding. He had listened because she remembered the missing bar. He had trusted her, because she could help him understand Georgiana. But when the evidence no longer needed Miriam, what remained? Miriam. It was the first time he had used her given name. Her chest tightened. Do not answer, because I have made silence uncomfortable. Clement stopped. That, more than anything, proved he had understood her. He looked as though there were several things he wanted to say, and none he trusted yet. At last he said, I will not lie to you merely to make this easier. Miriam nodded. Good. The word almost failed her. She gathered Lady Berwick's letter. I will finish the catalogue. I will submit my account. Then I will leave Hatherden. Clement's face became unreadable. "Is that what you want?" Miriam considered the question. "I do not know." His eyes held hers. "That is not the same as yes." "No, and not the same as no." "No." For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Then a knock sounded at the open door. Mr. Bellamy entered carrying a folded communication. "Your Grace, Miss Dallow. A reply has come from London regarding the Black Morocco book." The room changed at once. Clement took the letter, but handed it to Miriam unopened. She noticed the gesture. So did he. Miriam broke the seal. The music seller's establishment confirmed that the book had been sent for rebinding years earlier and collected afterward. The surviving front account no longer preserved the collector's identity. There was no signature, no household name, no proof of who had taken it. One detail remained. The book had never been formally returned through the shop. Miriam lowered the page. Clement's expression hardened. "So's we know it left Hatherden?" "Yes, but not who took possession. Not yet." Mr. Bellamy withdrew quietly. Miriam looked again at the letter. The answer was incomplete. For the first time, that felt useful. London held the next question, not another repetition of the last one. She folded the communication. "I will leave when the catalogue is complete." Clement did not try to stop her. The restraint hurt. It also mattered. "And the inquiry?" he asked. Miriam met his gaze. "I will continue it on my own." Outside, evening settled over Hatherden Court. Inside, something had changed more deeply than either of them was ready to name. Clement had tried to protect her, and discovered that protection could become control. Miriam had asked whether he would still wish to hear her when she was no longer useful. He had not yet found an answer. And somewhere in London, a missing Black Morocco book waited behind a name no surviving account had preserved. Miriam left Hatherden 4 days later with 2 trunks, 1 leather folio case, and the uncomfortable knowledge that departure did not feel like victory. She had completed the catalogue, submitted her account to Mr. Bellamy, and said farewell to the rooms that had altered the course of her life without ever truly belonging to her. Clement met her in the entrance hall before the carriage arrived. He did not ask her to stay. She was grateful for that. She was also hurt by it. The contradiction irritated her. "You have everything you need?" he asked. "Yes, Your Grace." His gaze moved briefly to the folio case in her hand. "And if you find anything in London, I will write." "To Bellamy?" Miriam looked at him. "To you, if that is what you prefer." A pause. "It is." Neither mentioned the question he had failed to answer. Neither mentioned that he had used her given name once. The footman opened the door. Miriam stepped outside without looking back until the carriage had turned beyond the front drive. Only then did she allow herself one glance at Hatherden Court. Clement was still standing in the doorway. In London, Miriam stayed in Bloomsbury with Mrs. Edith Mercer, her late mother's widowed cousin, a woman of 62, who believed most crises became less theatrical after breakfast. She received Miriam with affection, asked no foolish questions, and listened while Miriam explained only what was necessary. A wedding stopped. A musical bar erased. A missing Black Morocco book. Several commissions lost. Mrs. Mercer's expression changed only at the last part. "How many weeks can you manage?" Miriam looked at her. "I beg your pardon." "Without new work." The directness was almost a relief. Miriam opened her purse that evening and counted again. Mrs. Mercer sat across from her at the small writing table. 6 weeks comfortably, Miriam said. 8 if I am careful. And after that, I will find work. That was not my question. Miriam looked down at the coins. After that, I would have fewer choices. Mrs. Mercer nodded. Then the real question is not whether you can endure difficulty. You clearly can. What can you still afford to choose? Miriam thought about that for the rest of the night. By morning, she had her answer. She would continue the inquiry herself. Not because Clement needed her, not because Hatherden had asked, because the truth had already cost her too much to abandon halfway. 2 days later, with Mrs. Mercer accompanying her as far as the music establishment near Soho Square, Miriam entered a narrow shop smelling of dust, binding glue, and old paper. The current proprietor was the nephew of the man who had handled the late Duchess's music. Years earlier, he remembered the Hatherden name, though not the specific transaction. "The front account is incomplete," he said. "You already have the only surviving notation. Was nothing else kept? Possibly packaging records, parcel counterfoils, old binding slips. Most were discarded." Miriam's hope fell. Then he added, "Not all." Nearly an hour later, he returned carrying a narrow box tied with faded string. Inside were old slips arranged without elegance or logic. Miriam searched one by one. Hatherden, Somerby, Black Morocco, nothing. Then she found a folded counterfoil stained at one corner. Her fingers stopped. The description was brief. One Black Morocco music book, rebound, wrapped separately by instruction. Collected for delivery to Upper Brook Street. Recipient, Silas Wren, steward to the Earl of Stradwick. Miriam read the line twice, then a third time. This was not another vague connection. It named a man, a household, and an address. "Do you know whether the parcels was delivered?" she asked. The proprietor examined the notation. The counterfoil indicates collection was completed. By Wren himself? "I cannot say, but the item was released under his authority." Miriam looked again at the words wrapped separately by instruction. Why separately? Likely because the collector requested it. So whoever arranged the collection knew exactly which volume was wanted. The proprietor nodded. That would be the natural reading. Miriam felt something settle into place. The book had not simply vanished among a group of scores. Someone had distinguished it from the rest. Someone had known it mattered. She copied the entry carefully and requested a signed statement confirming the counterfoil's provenance. That evening, she wrote to Clement. She kept the letter brief. She told him that the Black Morocco book had been collected under the authority of Silas Wren, steward to the Earl of Stradwick, and that it had been wrapped separately by instruction. Then she added one line she nearly removed. Perhaps Lady Georgiana was loved at Hatherden. Perhaps she later decided that being loved entitled her to more than she had been given. She sealed the letter before she could reconsider. Clement arrived in London 2 days later. Mrs. Mercer received him in the front parlour with the calm suspicion of a woman who considered dukes a category of inconvenience rather than a reason for excitement. She remained in the adjoining morning room with the connecting doors open. Miriam entered, carrying the copied counterfoil. Clement stood immediately. For one moment, neither spoke. He looked more tired than he had at Hatherden. She wondered whether he thought the same of her. "You came quickly," she said. "Your letter did not invite delay." She handed him the copy. Clement read in silence. His expression changed when he reached the name. Silas Wren. "You know him? He served Lord Stradwick for more than 20 years. Then the book passed into Stradwick hands. Yes, Miriam waited. Clement lowered the paper, and the separate wrapping. Someone knew precisely which volume mattered. He looked toward the open doors, though his attention seemed far away. "There is something I need to tell you." Miriam sat. "Then tell me." Clement remained standing for several seconds before taking the chair opposite her. My mother truly cared for Georgiana. Miriam said nothing. Not merely as a polite visitor. She asked for her when she was ill. She trusted her in the private sitting room. She gave her books. Once, when Georgiana was absent for several weeks, my mother complained of the quiet. His voice grew lower. That part was real. Miriam looked at him. I know. He frowned. How? The prayer book, the note, the Scottish air. None of those were inventions. Then why does it feel as though I must choose between believing none of it and believing all of it? Miriam considered the question, because grief prefers absolutes. He almost smiled but did not. She continued. Perhaps Georgiana was loved. Perhaps she decided love entitled her to more than she had been given. Clement's gaze sharpened. The sentence from her letter had reached him, but hearing it aloud changed something. More than kindness, more than welcome, more than memory. Perhaps even more than your mother ever intended. He looked down at the copied counterfoil, and I gave the rest meaning because I wanted to. Miriam did not rescue him from that possibility. Perhaps. He looked at her. You could say no. Would you believe me? No, then I will not waste the lie. A quiet breath left him. Not laughter. Not quite. You have not changed. Miriam looked away. That is not entirely true. Clement followed her gaze. Lady Berwick, she wrote again. His expression tightened. I told her my opinion should not determine whom she employs. I know. Did she restore the commission? She did. Will you accept? Miriam looked at him. I have not decided. He nodded. Good. The answer surprised her. Good, because the decision is yours. There was no apology speech, no request for praise. Only evidence that he had understood the wrong he had done. Miriam felt some guarded place inside her, loosened by a fraction. Clement reached into his coat and removed a folded letter. There is one more thing. What is it? A letter Georgiana wrote to me 7 months ago. He handed it to Miriam. Read the final paragraph. Miriam opened the page. The handwriting was elegant and controlled. Georgiana described a melody the late Duchess had supposedly played for her, then wrote one phrase that stopped Miriam's breath, the upward turn before home. Miriam read it again. Her father had used those exact words in his private working notes when revising the 7th bar for the Duchess. Not merely the notes, the description, the emotional language around them. She looked up. Did you ever show this to anyone? No. Did Georgiana know my father's notes? Not through me. Miriam folded the letter carefully. The mystery had shifted again. Georgiana had not merely known the music. She had known the language in which that music had once been privately described. Clement watched her. What does it mean? Miriam looked at the copied counterfoil, then at Georgiana's letter. It means the Black Morocco book may have carried more than music. Annotations, possibly phrases, private language. The way your mother or my father explained what the music meant. Clement went very still. Miriam felt no triumph, only a deeper unease. Georgiana had once been loved at Hatherden. That was true. She may also have taken the private words of the dead and used them to make that love appear larger, more intimate, and more destined than it had been. Outside, carriage wheels passed over the London street. Inside, Miriam held the first proof that connected the missing book directly to Stradwick hands and the first written phrase, suggesting Georgiana had learned more from that book than a melody. Clement looked at her. What happens now? Miriam met his gaze. Now we find out whether Lady Georgiana can tell her own story without borrowing someone else's words. Clement returned to Mrs. Mercer's house 2 days later. not because another document had surfaced, but because the questions between him and Miriam had become too important to leave in writing. Mrs. Mercer received him in the front parlour with the same calm reserve as before, then withdrew to the adjoining room while leaving the connecting doors open. Miriam entered carrying no papers, Clement noticed. "No evidence today?" he asked. "Not from me." She took the chair opposite him. "Then perhaps I should be more nervous. Perhaps." For 1 second, neither smiled. Clement looked tired, but less guarded than he had at Hatherden. Miriam wondered whether that was because London had taken him out of his own house, where every room seemed to know his title before he entered. Here, he was simply a man sitting across from a woman he had wronged. He began without ceremony. "I wrote to Lady Berwick again." Miriam waited. "I told her that my opinion should not determine whom she employs. I also made it clear that my first letter was sent without your knowledge or consent." She wrote to me afterward. "And restored the commission?" "Yes." Clement nodded. "Will you accept it?" "I have not decided." His answer came quietly. "Good." Miriam looked at him. "You said that before." "I meant it before." "Why?" "Because I made a decision that was not mine to make. The least I can do now is stop pretending I know what you should choose." The words were plain. No grand apology. No excuse disguised as regret. Miriam felt something in her ease, though not enough to call forgiveness. "You wanted to protect me," she said. "Yes, and you used your rank to do it." "Yes." He did not flinch. "I thought influence could undo influence. I did not ask what that would make your work look like afterward." Miriam held his gaze. "No, I used my rank where I should have asked your consent." The precision of the admission mattered. He had understood the act, not merely the consequence. Miriam looked down at her folded hands. "That is better." Clement's mouth shifted slightly. "A generous verdict. Do not become proud. I will try not to." The faint warmth vanished almost as soon as it appeared. Another silence followed, and Miriam knew which question stood inside it. She had asked him at Hatherden whether he would still wish to hear her when she was no longer useful to his inquiry. He had not answered then. She had told herself that honesty was preferable to comfort. That had not made the silence hurt less. Clement leaned forward slightly. "There is something else I owe you." Miriam looked at him. "An answer?" "Yes." She did not help him. Clement continued. "I first noticed you because you stopped my wedding. That is difficult to forget." "I should hope so." His voice remained serious. "Then I respected you because you remembered what others missed. I trusted you because you refused to say more than you could prove. I feared for you because you would not play what you knew was false." Miriam's chest tightened. He paused, choosing his next words with visible care. "But after you left Hatherden, what I missed was not your evidence." She did not move. "What did you miss?" "The way you never filled silence merely to make me comfortable." Miriam looked away for one breath, then back. Clement continued. "I missed being told when I was wrong. I missed the expression you make when someone says something foolish, and you are deciding whether honesty is worth the trouble. I wondered whether London suited you, whether you were working, whether you had enough commissions, whether you were sleeping, whether you had struck your father's tuning fork in Mrs. Mercer's parlour and decided the room could be trusted." Miriam's fingers tightened together. "You remembered that. I remember many things about you. Gratitude can do that." "Yes." His answer came so quickly that she almost recoiled. Clement did not soften it. "I am grateful to you." Miriam watched him. "Then perhaps that is all this is, no." "How do you know?" He took his time. Because gratitude explains why I thank you. It does not explain why I thought of you when there was nothing to investigate. Miriam felt the room grow smaller. Not intimate, not safe, honest. Are you grateful to me? She asked. Yes. Is that why you came today? No. The answer was immediate. Something inside her gave way by a fraction. Clement did not reach for her hand. He did not step closer. That restraint made the moment more difficult, not less. Why did you come? She asked. Because I had promised myself I would not answer your question until I knew whether I could trust the answer. And now I know that when the inquiry ends, I will still want to hear you. Miriam swallowed. That sounds very certain. It is the first certainty I have earned badly enough to respect. She almost smiled. That was nearly too polished. Then I apologize. Do not. It would ruin the effect. For the first time, Clement laughed. Quietly. Briefly. The sound changed him. Miriam felt an answering warmth and distrusted it at once. She looked toward the open doors. Mrs. Mercer's distant movement in the next room reminded them both where they were. Clement's expression grew serious again. There is another matter. Of course there is. My solicitor wrote to Lord Stradwick requesting an account of the Black Morocco book and any Hatherden papers or music still in his household's possession. Miriam waited. The response was evasive. He claims there is no sufficient proof that the book remained with his household after collection. The parcel counterfoil proves it was collected under his steward's authority. Yes, he does not deny that. He refuses to explain what happened afterward. And the book has never been returned. No. Miriam thought of Georgiana's letter, the upward turn before home, her father's private phrase. The late Duchess's affection transformed into something larger. Then private correspondence will not settle this. Clement studied her. I agree. What do you intend to do? Ask the questions before witnesses. Miriam's eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of witnesses? Only those necessary. People who witnessed either the interrupted wedding or the musical supper. The chaplain. Bellamy. The music seller's representative. My solicitor. Not half of London society. No theatrical accusation. No declaration of guilt before the facts are heard. No. Miriam held his gaze. You have thought about what I would object to. Constantly. She ignored the effect of that answer. Where? Hatherden House in Mayfair. A musical evening? Yes. That is dangerous. Yes. Georgiana may refuse to attend. She may. Lord Stradwick may forbid it. He may try. Miriam looked toward the window. Carriage wheels passed outside. The city continued, with complete indifference, to vanished music books and interrupted marriages. If the truth is established, she said slowly, it should not be hidden afterward. Clement was silent. She turned back to him. I was accused publicly. My work was attacked publicly. I was made to look ambitious and dishonest before people whose opinions affected my livelihood. If the truth is proved, it should not disappear into a solicitor's office. Agreed. That was easy. Not everything between us must be difficult. Miriam raised an eyebrow. That remains to be seen. Clement almost smiled again. Then his expression changed. Will you come? She looked at him. You assumed I would. For half a second, dangerous. I corrected myself. Miriam let the silence remain. He did not pressure her. He did not remind her what she had lost or what he had offered. At last she said, yes, but I speak for myself. Always. The answer came without hesitation. Miriam believed him more than she had before, not because he had become perfect, because he had been wrong, understood the wrong, and changed what he did next. Clement rose when the visit ended. Miriam stood as well. He reached the doorway, then stopped. "There is one more question." She almost laughed. "You have many. This one is not about the book." Miriam waited. Clement looked at her with a seriousness that left no room for misunderstanding. "When this is over, may I court you?" Her breath caught. He continued before she could answer. "Not as payment, not from gratitude, not while the truth still requires you to stand beside me." Miriam studied him for a long moment. The man before her was still a duke, still powerful, still capable of changing the atmosphere of a room merely by entering it. But now he was asking, not commanding, not arranging, asking. "Ask me when you no longer need an answer," she said. Clement held her gaze. Then he bowed. "I will." He left a few minutes later. Miriam remained by the window until his carriage disappeared into the London street. The missing book had led them to Stradwick hands. Georgiana's letter had revealed language taken from a private musical world. Lord Stradwick had refused to account for what his household had received. Now the truth would be brought into a room full of witnesses, where neither title nor beauty could erase the number of bars on a page. And for the first time, Miriam understood that the most dangerous question waiting in Mayfair was not only whether Georgiana had deceived Clement. It was whether, once the deception was stripped away, Clement would still choose to listen to the woman who had exposed it. Georgiana arrived at Hatherden House in Mayfair, 11 minutes late, and every person in the drawing-room understood that the delay was deliberate. Miriam watched her enter in silver-grey silk, composed enough to suggest indifference and pale enough to reveal the effort it cost. Lord Stradwick followed at her side. His expression carried the offended dignity of a man who had already decided that any question asked of him was an insult. Clement stood near the fireplace and greeted them with formal courtesy. He did not move toward Miriam. He did not need to. She had arrived as herself, not as his employee, not as a dependent of Hatherden, and not as a woman who required a duke to lend weight to her words. The gathering was smaller than the musical supper had been. Only those who mattered were present. Several guests had witnessed the interrupted wedding. Others had attended the evening when Miriam refused to play the altered 7-bar anthem. The chaplain stood near one of the long windows. Mr. Bellamy had come from Hampshire. The representative from the London music establishment waited beside a narrow table, holding the parcel counterfoil. Clement's solicitor remained nearby with Georgiana's old letter and the dated musical record. No one called the evening a hearing. No one needed to. Georgiana looked around the room once, then turned to Clement. "You have assembled quite an audience, only witnesses, for music, for facts." Lord Stradwick gave a short laugh. "How solemn! One would think the fate of the kingdom depended upon a missing measure." Miriam felt the familiar contempt beneath the words, but it no longer surprised her. Clement did not answer the insult. He waited until the final door had closed before addressing the room. Several accusations were made publicly against Miss Dallow. Her honesty was questioned. Her motives were attacked. Her livelihood was affected. "I will not answer those accusations with rumor, nor will I ask anyone here to accept my judgment merely because of my rank. We will establish only what can be shown." Miriam saw Lord Stradwick's mouth tighten. Clement continued. "3 facts matter tonight. The first is that the Hatherden anthem contained 8 bars years before Lady Georgiana described its 7th measure to me. The second is that the late Duchess's black Morocco music book left London under the authority of Silas Wren, steward to Lord Stradwick. The third is that Lady Georgiana knew the distinctive ornament in the missing seventh bar before Miss Dallow ever came to Hatherden. Georgiana lifted her chin. Because your mother played it for me. That is what you told me. It is the truth. Clement's face remained unreadable. Then truth should withstand questions. Lord Stradwick stepped forward. This entire evening exists because a woman who earns her living copying music has persuaded you to doubt your own family. Miriam looked at him. My position does not alter the number of bars on the page. The room grew still. Lord Stradwick's expression hardened. Your position explains a great deal about your motive. Then ask me about motive after the music is settled. Georgiana turned toward Clement. And you permit this tone? Clement looked at her. Miss Dallow speaks for herself. Convenient. Georgiana's gaze shifted toward Miriam. You have become remarkably secure in this house, for someone who insisted she wanted no place in it. Miriam felt the old wound beneath the accusation. She remembered counted coins, cancelled work, and the terror of becoming dependent on Clement's favor. She also remembered leaving Hatherden rather than surrender that independence. I am not secure because I am in this room, she said. I am here because I was accused in rooms like it. Georgiana's face tightened. You have made a profession of injury. Clement's voice cut in. Enough. Georgiana looked at him. No, let us speak plainly. You broke our wedding because she stopped playing. You brought her into your confidence. You followed her to London, and now you gather witnesses to destroy me. Are we truly pretending your feelings have nothing to do with this? The accusation drew a breath from several guests. Miriam looked at Clement. He did not glance toward her before answering. What I feel is not the fact before us, Georgiana faltered. Clement continued. My feelings neither add a bar nor remove one. Miriam felt the answer more deeply than she expected. He had not denied caring for her. He had simply refused to make love a substitute for proof. Lord Stradwick turned toward the door. We are leaving. Clement looked at him. You are free to go. The Earl stopped. Pride did what pressure could not. He remained. Georgiana did too. Miriam understood then that neither of them could bear to leave, while others might interpret departure as surrender. Clement stepped aside. Miss Dallow. Miriam crossed the room toward the square pianoforte. The instrument had been positioned so every guest could see her hands. The altered manuscript lay on a nearby stand. Though she did not need it, she knew the cadence by memory. As she approached, Clement moved only close enough to ask quietly, Would you prefer me beside you? Miriam looked at him. For one brief second, she remembered the man who had written to Lady Berwick without asking, trying to protect her by rearranging consequences with his rank. He had learned. She had seen it. Now he was asking. No, she said. Listen from where you are. Clement held her gaze, then stepped back without hesitation. The gesture was small. Miriam felt its meaning anyway. She sat at the instrument. No one spoke. She placed her hands on the keys and began. The first bar rose cleanly into the room. Then the second. The third followed with quiet gravity. By the fourth, even Lord Stradwick had stopped shifting his weight. The fifth descended. The sixth settled into the familiar cadence. Miriam stopped. The missing place hung in the silence. She did not play the seventh from memory. She did not complete the eighth. She simply turned on the bench and looked at Georgiana. Lady Georgiana, perhaps you would finish the seventh. A whisper moved through the room. Georgiana's face whitened. I beg your pardon. You have said the late Duchess played this passage for you privately. Miriam kept her voice calm. Then you know the missing bar. Lord Stradwick stepped forward. This is childish theatre. Miriam looked at him. Then it should be easily disproved. Georgiana's eyes flashed. You want me to perform for your amusement? No. Then what do you want? An answer. Miriam stood and moved aside from the bench. You may play it, or hum it. The instrument is not necessary. Georgiana stared at her. You think this is a trap. I think it is a question. And if I refuse, then you refuse. Miriam did not add more. That restraint made the silence heavier. Georgiana looked toward Clement. He gave her nothing. No command, no rescue, no reassurance. Then she looked at the witnesses. Pride moved across her face before decision did. Miriam saw it happen. Georgiana crossed the room. Every step was controlled. She stopped beside the pianoforte and looked down at the keys. You believe music belongs only to those who write it down. Miriam shook her head. No. You believe memory belongs only to you. No. Georgiana sat. Then listen. Her right hand rose. Miriam felt Clement go still across the room. Georgiana touched the first note of the missing measure. Then the second. The phrase descended exactly as it should. She reached the pause. Then came the delicate upward turn. The unpublished ornament. 4 notes Miriam had played in the chapel. 4 notes scraped from the wedding score. 4 notes Georgiana had claimed she knew only because the late Duchess once played them privately. She completed the measure perfectly. The final sound faded. No one moved. Georgiana kept her hand above the keys for 1 second too long. Miriam looked at her. If that bar never existed, Lady Georgiana, how did you know where the F-sharp falls? Georgiana's hand remained suspended above the keys. The final note had faded, but Miriam's question did not. No one in the room moved. Even the candle flames seemed strangely still. Across the room, Clement watched Georgiana with an expression stripped of anger and almost of colour. Lord Stradwick looked from his daughter to the pianoforte as though disbelief alone might undo what everyone had heard. Georgiana withdrew her hand. I could have heard it anywhere. Miriam remained beside the instrument. Where? From the Duchess. Clement reached toward the narrow table and took up an old letter. Then perhaps you can explain this. Georgiana looked at him. He opened the page. 7 months ago, before Miss Dallow came to Hatherden, you wrote that my mother once played for you the upward turn before home. Georgiana's face changed. Miriam felt the room tighten. Clement continued. Those words were not merely a description of the melody. They were the exact phrase Mr. Dallow used in his private working notes when revising the 7th bar for my mother. Georgiana stood from the bench. Your mother could have repeated them. Perhaps. Clement's answer surprised several guests. I will not deny what is possible simply because it is inconvenient. Lord Stradwick gave a sharp laugh. At last, some reason. Clement did not look at him. His gaze remained on Georgiana. My mother cared for you. Georgiana went still. I know she did. I will not erase that, because you may have deceived me later. For the first time that evening, Georgiana's composure broke in a way that looked more like pain than fear. She turned away. You speak as though kindness were nothing. No, Clement's voice lowered. I am saying it was real. Georgiana looked back at him. Then why am I standing here like a criminal? Because what was given freely and what was taken are not the same thing. Miriam saw the words strike. Georgiana's eyes moved toward the letter in Clement's hand, then toward the parcel counterfoil. The black Morocco book was not stolen. Miriam said nothing. Clement did. Where is it? I do not know. It was collected under the authority of your father's steward. That proves only collection. Then tell me what happened afterward. Georgiana's lips parted. but no answer came. Lord Stradwick stepped forward. "This has become intolerable." Clement turned toward him. "You are free to leave and abandon my daughter to this spectacle. You brought her into a marriage alliance built partly upon what she told me about my mother. You may remain and hear the questions." Lord Stradwick's face hardened. Georgiana spoke before he could. "I had the book." The admission was so quiet that several guests leaned forward. Clement did not move. Miriam watched him absorb it. After it was rebound, Georgiana continued, "It came to my father's household." "Why?" Clement asked. She looked at the floor. "Because I asked for it." Lord Stradwick turned sharply. "Georgiana." "No." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "You wanted me silent before. I will not be silent now." She looked at Clement. "Your mother let me read from that book when she was ill. She showed me arrangements she loved, notes in the margins, small things she had written to herself. I thought it would return to Hatherden, but it did not." "No." "Why?" Georgiana swallowed. "Because I kept it." A murmur passed through the room. Clement closed his eyes for one brief second. When he opened them, grief was there, but so was something steadier. "Why?" Georgiana's answer came unevenly. "Because it was the last thing in Hatherden that still felt as though she had chosen me." Miriam felt a flicker of pity despite everything. Georgiana continued. "She was kind to me. She asked for me. She told me I brought quiet into the house. Then she died, and suddenly I was only a visitor again." Her gaze moved around the room. "Do any of you understand what it is to be almost part of a place? To be welcomed often enough that you begin to think the door will always open? Then learn that affection is not belonging." Miriam understood the wound. She did not excuse the choice. "And later?" Miriam asked. Georgiana looked at her. "Later, Clement missed his mother." Clement's jaw tightened. "So you used the book?" "I used what was true." "Some of it," he said. Georgiana's face crumpled for one instant before pride restored it. "Yes, some of it." Miriam kept her voice calm. "Did the Black Morocco book contain the 7th bar?" Georgiana hesitated. "Yes." "And the phrase 'the upward turn before home'?" Another pause. "Yes." Clement's hand closed around the letter. "So when you told me my mother had played that exact ornament for you and described it in those words, you were using material from the book." Georgiana looked at him. "She may have said them to me." "Did she?" Clement asked. Georgiana said nothing. The silence answered enough. Lord Stradwick stepped between them by half a pace. "This proves no alteration of the wedding score." Miriam turned to him. "No, it does not." His expression changed, almost triumphant. Miriam continued, "But the key was requested through Lady Georgiana's maid." Lady Georgiana entered the chapel. She had previously asked whether old ink could be removed without destroying paper. She knew the exact bar that later disappeared. Georgiana's voice sharpened. "Those facts prove nothing. By themselves, no." Miriam agreed so readily that Georgiana faltered. Clement looked at her, then back at Georgiana. "Why did the score need to lose only that bar?" Georgiana went still. Miriam saw the question reach her before anyone else did. Clement continued. "Not the entire anthem. Not the page. One measure. The exact measure you knew from the book." Lord Stradwick said, "She does not have to answer." Clement turned toward him. "You should not have said that." The Earl's face changed. Georgiana looked at her father. Something passed between them. Fear, anger, memory. Miriam waited. No one needed to fill the silence. At last, Georgiana said, "I knew Miss Dallow remembered the cadence." Miriam's pulse quickened. "How?" "I heard you speaking with Mr. Bellamy during the catalogue work. You said the ending had 8 bars, and that you remembered the 7th because your father had revised it for the Duchess. And you feared Clement would ask me about it. Georgiana's eyes filled. Yes, Clement's voice was barely above a whisper. So you erased it. I only wanted one measure gone. Miriam looked at her. Who told you one was enough? Georgiana's gaze moved toward Lord Stradwick. The room changed. The Earl stepped forward. Do not answer that. Georgiana gave a broken laugh. There, you have answered it yourself. You are frightened and confused. No, I was confused when I listened to you. Lord Stradwick's face drained of colour. Georgiana looked at Clement. I told father that Miss Dallow remembered the 8 bars. I told him you had heard me describe the ornament months before she arrived. He said the score had to be altered before the wedding. Lord Stradwick's voice rose. That is a lie. Georgiana turned on him. You said 1 measure, no more, enough to break the memory without making the page look newly written. Silence crashed through the room. Miriam felt the final mechanism settle into place. 1 measure, no more, enough to break the memory. Lord Stradwick looked around him as though searching for an ally. She is distraught. Clement's expression was cold now. Did you instruct her to erase the bar? Absolutely not. Georgiana looked at Miriam. Her breathing had become uneven. I entered the chapel. I used the master key. I opened the cabinet. She stopped. Miriam did not press her. Georgiana forced the rest out. I scraped away the 7th bar. No one gasped. No one needed to. The truth was quieter than that. Clement looked at her for a long moment. You nearly married me while carrying my mother's book and altering the music that might expose what you had done. Georgiana's eyes shone. I thought if the wedding happened, it would all become true enough. Clement's face tightened with pain. It does not work that way. I know that now. Lord Stradwick stepped toward the door. Clement stopped him with words alone. The engagement is ended, permanently. Georgiana closed her eyes. Clement continued. The Black Morocco book and any Hatherden papers in your household's possession will be returned through my solicitor. Any private financial support, guarantees, or arrangements connected to this alliance are withdrawn. Lord Stradwick stared at him. You would ruin us. No, I am ending my support of a deception. Your own obligations remain yours. The Earl said nothing. He did not need to. Everyone in the room understood what the loss of Hatherden backing would mean to already nervous creditors. Clement then turned toward the gathered witnesses. His voice carried clearly. Miss Dallow did not destroy my marriage. She refused to lend music to a deception. Miriam felt every gaze come to her. This time, she did not look away. I did not stop because I wished to be seen, she said. I stopped because I would not use my hands to make an erased truth sound complete. No one applauded. Miriam was grateful. Applause would have reduced the moment to spectacle. Instead, the room remained honest and still. Later, after the last guest had gone, and the documents had been gathered, Clement found Miriam beside the dark pianoforte. He stopped several feet away. You once asked whether I would still wish to hear you when you were no longer useful to me. Miriam looked at him. His face was tired, stripped of ceremony and rank. I believe I owe you an answer. Clement stopped several feet from Miriam, leaving enough space between them that his answer could not feel like another form of pressure. The pianoforte beside her had gone dark in the candlelight. The room that had held accusation, confession, and public judgment now contained only the faint scent of wax and the quiet after-truth. I am still grateful to you, he said. Miriam watched him carefully. I would distrust you if you claimed otherwise. A small breath of humor passed through his face. Good, because I have no intention of lying now. Then, continue. Clement looked down for a moment, choosing his words without haste. Gratitude is not why I noticed the room changed after you left Hatherden. It is not why I wondered whether you had enough work, whether London suited you, or whether you had struck your father's tuning fork in Mrs. Mercer's parlour and decided the room could be trusted. Miriam felt her pulse change. He continued, "It is not why I remembered the way you looked at me when I used my rank without asking, or why I understood, afterward, that protection can become control if the person being protected has no choice." Miriam did not look away. That was painfully specific. I was hoping for honesty rather than elegance. You have achieved both. Clement almost smiled. Then his expression softened. You once asked whether I would still wish to hear you when you were no longer useful to my inquiry. Yes. The inquiry is over. Miriam felt the words settle between them. The missing bar had been explained. Georgiana had confessed. Lord Stradwick had lost the alliance he had tried to preserve. The Black Morocco book would return through proper channels. There was nothing left for Miriam to solve. Clement took one quiet breath. "And I still want to hear you." Her throat tightened. He continued before she could answer. "Not because you saved me from a marriage. Not because you remembered what others missed. Not because I owe you anything. I want to hear what you play when no one has asked for it. I want to know what you choose when no mystery requires your attention. I want to know whether you are happy before I decide I have any right to stand near that happiness." Miriam looked down. No one had ever offered her that kind of attention without also wanting something in return. Work, obedience, music, gratitude, even kindness had often come with an expectation attached. She raised her eyes. "You sound very certain." "I am. Dangerous, probably. And what exactly do you intend to do with this certainty?" Clement's voice remained steady. "Ask permission to court you." Miriam had expected the words. They still affected her, properly, painfully properly if required. With calls, yes, letters, yes, no letters to my patrons. Clement winced. That condition is deserved. No permanent position invented to keep me conveniently dependent. Agreed. No assuming disagreement is cruelty. I cannot promise not to be disappointed. Miriam lifted an eyebrow. That is not what I asked. Then agreed. She let the silence remain for a moment. Clement did not rush her. That mattered more than any declaration could have done. "Very well," she said. "You may court me." He did not step closer. He did not reach for her hand. He only bowed, and the restraint moved her more deeply than spectacle would have. The weeks that followed gave truth time to become ordinary. The Black Morocco book was returned to Hatherden through Clement's solicitor, along with several other papers that should never have left the Somerby household. Lord Stradwick's creditors became less patient once Hatherden's expected support disappeared. Georgiana withdrew from society for a time. Miriam asked for no harsher consequence. Exposure had already taken away the future. Georgiana had tried to secure through deception. Miriam's own work returned more slowly. Lady Berwick wrote again. Mrs. M's Armitage did too. This time Miriam accepted one commission and declined the other. The choice mattered. Clement did not interfere. He came to Mrs. Mercer's house when propriety allowed. He wrote when it did not. His letters were restrained at first, then gradually less so. He wrote about Hatherden, his mother's recovered book, estate matters, and one peacock that had apparently developed a personal grievance against the terrace. Miriam wrote about London, commissions, music, and Mrs. Mercer's firm belief that dukes should never be allowed to become too impressed with themselves. Months later, Miriam performed a new composition at a small London musical gathering. The piece had nothing to do with Hatherden, the wedding, the missing bar, or the late Duchess. It was hers. On the printed score beneath the title appeared the name M. Dallow. Clement attended and sat where he had been placed. He did not ask for special treatment. He did not hover near Miriam before the performance. He simply listened. Afterward, a patron who had once withdrawn a commission approached Miriam with careful warmth and suggested that perhaps old misunderstandings should be forgotten. Miriam looked at her calmly. "You were free to withdraw your patronage. I am equally free to decline its return." The woman flushed and left. Clement had watched from several feet away. He did not intervene. Later, when the room had thinned and Mrs. Mercer was speaking with another guest nearby, Clement approached. "I liked the second movement." Miriam looked at him. "Why?" He hesitated. "I am not sure. A promising beginning." It felt as though it wanted to return to something familiar, then chose not to. Miriam went still. Clement seemed suddenly uncertain. "Was that foolish?" "No." "Good. But you have improved alarmingly. Severe instruction." Miriam smiled. In that moment she understood the answer she had been waiting for. He had come to listen when nothing needed to be proved. No evidence depended on her. No scandal required her. No mystery made her useful. He had come because she was there. That was when she chose him. Not publicly, not with a declaration. Simply in the quiet certainty that when he asked again, her answer would be different. Proper courtship continued through autumn and winter. Clement did not become perfect. Miriam did not become easy. He still moved too quickly toward responsibility. She still sometimes mistook caution for safety. They disappointed one another in small ways and learned that imperfection was not betrayal. By spring, Clement asked her to marry him in Mrs. Mercer's parlor, with the connecting doors open, and no audience except the woman who had given Miriam shelter when scandal cost her work. He did not kneel theatrically. He simply said, "I love you when you are useful to me, when you disagree with me, when you leave the room, and when you return. I love you when the truth is convenient and when it is not. Will you marry me?" Miriam looked at the man who had once tried to protect her by making choices for her and had learned instead to ask, "Listen and wait." "Yes," she said, "I will." Their marriage was quiet by ducal standards. Miriam preferred it that way. She became Duchess of Hatherden, but continued to publish under the name M. Dallow. Clement never objected. The altered chapel manuscript remained preserved with the scraped seventh bar still visible. It was not repaired into false perfection. By midsummer, Hatherden Court held a small musical gathering for guests, who came because they loved music rather than scandal. After the last carriage departed and the lamps were lowered, Miriam remained in the music room beside the instrument. A new score lay open before her. Her name appeared beneath the title. Beside it rested her father's small brass tuning fork. Clement entered quietly and stopped near the door. "Am I interrupting?" "Not yet." He crossed the room and picked up the tuning fork. "May I?" "Carefully. You still have little faith in me." "Not with instruments." He struck it lightly against the wooden edge of the pianoforte. One clear note rose between them. Miriam listened until the pitch steadied. Clement waited. He did not tell her when to begin. She placed her hands above the keys. This time no wedding required her music. No villain challenged it. No mystery depended upon it. No one needed her to prove anything. Clement looked at the blank first measure of another new score. "What will you play?" Miriam smiled. "Something no one has asked for." Then she lowered her hands to the keys and began.